Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So, Lindsay and I are here at this time on this Facebook Live to share about our offering that we're putting out there, our Community Grief Ritual, Walking to the Well, that we're going to be holding on the east shore of Kootenay Lake from February 3rd to February 5th. And we're here to talk about grief, to share what we're inspired by, to share and explore this theme and topic, and to sort of support a tuning into the container together, and to really help anyone who's interested feel into this container and this space and what our intentions are. And so I'm actually going to invite us all just to take a moment and to take a breath. It's really important with grief work and with somatic work and dropping in to these other spaces that we slow down. We feel our bodies. We feel the earth. We feel the waters, the sun and the moon, the stars, the mountains, our breath. And just really wanting to speak into this moment here together, that our intention is to really hold and create a curiosity around what it is to be with our grief, to tend to our grief, and how to do that together, held in sort of the ancientness of ritual. And so I'm super delighted to be here with Lindsay and to go through this journey with her. I've always wanted to create something in this way with you, so it feels really good. It's like, it's happening. And one of the questions that we thought we'd start with is just what inspires each of us to show up in grief work and to show up in offering this ritual. Yeah. I don't know if you want to start.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah.
Such an honor as well to be co-creating with you.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, and hello everybody. I've been very inspired for many years now to step into grief work. And I find my relationship with grief deepens over time, and I find it to be like so intricately connected with life. And especially in my relationship and my journey with motherhood. You have a 6-year-old son, and I've also had so I have some unborn children as well, and that has all like many different aspects and experiences in life have initiated me into deeper relationship with grief. I found the path of motherhood particularly because it is I find a constant letting go, and there's so much. I find there's even more beauty that seems to show up in that letting go and deepening into that. So I don't know, that's what inspired me to start with. And so I just find in general in the human experience, I find that grief is such a integral part of our walk, and it just feels like it's it's like this cultural elephant that is just not. It's so it's there and it's not really being named, and I find especially in this massive journey we've collectively been on in the last 3 years, there is so much more. I think that many are grieving, and yeah, myself included. And so I just see that I'm inspired because I see that in tending to that in myself and in community and with others, that there's ever more possibility of beauty.
Yeah, that word beauty really, like, there's something so close to me, or in my body, or in my experience, or in my, between grief and beauty. Like, they just feel so intricately woven somehow. And so when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, and I was really feeling what you were saying there too, about sort of the elephant in the room, and really resonating with this theme of like this place where grief is sort of this friend we walk with throughout life. Or I've loved thinking about her like a goddess, like grief as like a goddess that is like moving through us and around us, but how in our culture we can almost be blind to that goddess or that teacher, and in a way kind of like almost judge ourselves or want to fix something that is just a natural part of life, but also we do need to learn how to be with.
Yes.
And if we don't know how to be with it, or we don't know how to tend to it, or we don't know how to befriend it, how it can start to feel like something we want to get rid of or get away from, or so I just really felt that in what you shared. Yeah, and for me, I was telling a friend this, and it was like I was brought to tears, because for me this offering is such full circle. When I started off as a social worker in my early 20s, my first job was, I had two sort of roles working with grief. I was very drawn to the experience of grief, and one was in working in women's health in the hospital, and it was specifically in working with medical terminations of pregnancies. So being very close with that process of saying goodbye, and working with stillbirths and late-term miscarriages and these sorts of things, and being very close to that like birth and death line, and then also working in the PICU as a social worker for 5 years. And so that was holding space for families during end of life, during, maybe coming close to the end of life, but living, but sort of like on that precipice. And I remember feeling so strongly that that place was so powerful and so important, and I felt so inspired by it. But what I also felt was, without the container of ritual or culture or tradition or other resources coming in, how it almost was too much to hold when there wasn't enough of that. And I remember at that time being hungry to bring more of that, but not really having the tools or the know-how at the time. And then I've gone on this whole journey of learning like shamanism and ritual and ceremony and these things. And I feel like I've finally come full circle to be like, now I can create this space. I can help create this space of resource, of ritual, of beauty, of tradition. For grief to land, for the depths of the teaching to really be held. And that's what I'm like, it's like my soul is almost relieved. Like, okay, like I've landed in this new place. And just to dovetail into why ritual feels so powerful for me, is I remember watching different families go through this experience. And one of the families I saw that went through it the most beautifully, or the most resourced, was a family who was still very connected to Indigenous cultural ways. And it was literally like 100 people showed up, and there were songs, and there were traditions, and there were things that were done every day in the process. And I remember my cells being like, I need this. And I felt the way that family went through grief was so different. And I'm really excited about this idea of like calling that back, because of course that exists in all of our cells. It exists in it for all of us, but we need to remember, and we need to create the spaces. And so I'm so excited to create a space that is for that is for us being that for each other. and bringing in beauty. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much. What is coming to me with what you shared is, a friend said to me once this past year that she feels like her becoming of being human is it's so vulnerable and tender, in that she's like learning who she is through the eyes of others and through like relationship with others. And I kind of feel like, as we're remembering, even though as you just said, that like our relationship with grief and how to work with it in ceremony and in ritual and in like healthy containing ways lives within all of us. It is like a language that we are remembering and rediscovering, and it's almost like we are discovering parts of ourselves that we may have been disconnected with or from, and even like for generations, and so there's a great vulnerability in that, and also in that there can be shame in not knowing, and like, how do I even be with this? And I feel like that's part of why grief can be such a charged word or an energy, because there can be so much shame in the vulnerability of it, of like the not knowing, and which is why I and we are so passionate too and excited about this opportunity, really to find that way of finding that language together. Because there's like such a deep settling that can happen in ourselves and in the co-creation, the unique constellation of people who will come to be a part of this.
And also there was something there that I wanted to name, is like this place where it's like, I'm not working with my grief, or I'm not being with it. And there is something to be said for our nervous systems are designed that we won't go into the deep wells of grief unless there is some sort of holding, you know? And this sort of like funny thing where then there's this idea like, well, we need to feel our grief. But if we don't have a container that can actually hold us in it, if we don't have a space where we can totally melt and know that we're going to be honored in it and seen as healthy, then our systems actually won't go there, you know? And so this sort of like self-compassion of like, we actually have to, like you said, learn the language of grief and learn what it is, like what are the containers, what are the spaces, what are the resources, what are the experiences that actually hold me enough that I can touch in and be transformed by that energy. And this is why I'm excited too that we both bring the somatic piece, because I think that's like we both have where we really resonate on so many levels, but two of the levels I'm going to speak to right now are sort of the ceremony and ritual piece and the energy work and the shamanism, and then also the somatic therapy piece. So having an awareness of the way the nervous system works and how we create new neural pathways and how we work with trauma energy. And so I feel like when we're talking about grief, we kind of have to always be weaving between like the spiritual and the mystical and these realms, and then also have an awareness of like, and we're going to be touching into trauma in these places, you know, like we're going to be working with the wiring in our nervous system. And I think this is where people can get hooked up, is like teasing apart what part is the grief and what part is the trauma, and how do I touch into grief without spiraling into trauma. And I think for Lindsay and I, we really are going to bring that into how we create the container, and then also teachings and speaking to it throughout the time together to help, so that when we leave the ritual, all of us, including Lindsay and I, can have a better sense of felt sense in our body of the healing of the ritual itself, and then B, how to actually move in it in ourselves in a daily life too. And I think for me, it's like, that's what I'm really interested in, is how do we start to have a felt sense, an embodied sense in our lived experience that helps us actually reorient to grief in a whole new way when we leave, you know? Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, and be empowered to be with it in our lives and share that, have tools and resources to share that with others, because this is work that is relevant to all of us.
Oh my gosh.
It's such deep medicine.
Yeah.
In these times especially.
Yeah. When I just want to mention briefly, I don't know if any of you know about Frances Weller's book, The Wild Edges of Sorrow. I can't even remember what led me to read the book, but it was like one of those things where this book showed up and I just instantly was fully immersed in it and crying and feeling it. And I remember just hearing how he's like, just this work needs to be happening, rituals need to be happening. Mm-hmm. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, I need to make this happen. I need to call in people to do this with. And then it turned out Lindsay was like, I'm feeling that too, which was like so beautiful. But one of the things that I loved about his book is he talks about the different types of grief. And for me, it sort of helped me feel grief as like this bigger experience of humanity. And, you know, one of them that really spoke to me is like the ancestral grief, so the layers of ancestral grief. There's also, you know, what we longed for or that we thought we would have and that we don't have, you know. And so sort of this grief work is touching not only on actual losses in our lives, but is talking about sort of existential loss. Yeah. And cultural loss, because even there's the layer of loss that all of us are processing is the loss of these rituals. Like the loss of the culture that would hold us and the tenderness of relearning the language, you know? Yeah. So I'd really encourage anyone, if they're really interested, to dive more into this. It's a great book for just feeling into the different edges and also the beauty of the work of grief. Yeah. I'm just tuning in to see if there's anything else that feels important to share. It feels really a little bit complete for me.
Yeah. I'm curious, and with anyone who's with us now, I wonder if anyone might have any questions for us.
Maybe not right now. We are going to come on and do some more lives, and I might just share a little bit briefly that the ritual will be from Friday at 4 we'll begin until Sunday around 1, and we'll be having meals together, and it will be sort of a ceremonial space that'll be held in a really sacred way. We'll be weaving in nature, we'll be weaving in very specific rituals, and we'll also have, you know, music, movement, sound. We'll be bringing in embodiment practices and teachings as well, you know, myths, stories, teachings, archetypes, information to take home with us. And so, and our goal really is to be the well, to create the well for us to walk to. And do our magic. So we'll be posting more over the next little while, details about this, and hope that this is inspiring our community, and that just the right constellation of people, as Lindsay said, reach out and show up. And so if you have any questions or are wondering about if this is the space for you, don't hesitate to reach out to Lindsay and I, because we can explore that with you. Okay.
Thanks for being with us, everyone, and we are really looking forward to being with you in this sacred ritual for those that choose to come.